Silver Pines looked like a postcard someone forgot to mail. Hidden high in the mountains of Northern California, it shimmered with wealth, elegance, and the kind of beauty that demanded silence. The air was crisp. The streets were lined with imported cherry trees, and the town's elite lived in mansions carved into the hillsides, where fog clung to the glass like ghosts reluctant to let go. It was in this secluded haven that Savannah Morgan ruled. At 34, Savannah was the kind of woman who seemed built for legend, heiress of the Morgan Hotel dynasty. Her wealth wasn't new. It was inherited, reinforced by generations of influence. She wore diamonds like others wore perfume, threw parties that blurred the line between gala and opera, and commanded a kind of loyalty that felt both seductive and suffocating. But beneath the surface of all her splendor was something else. Loneliness. No amount of marble, silk, or applause could fill the quiet spaces of her estate after the guests left. And Savannah, who was used to getting what she wanted, had grown used to controlling what she could not possess. And then, one autumn afternoon, she met Elliot Lane. He was 10 years younger, tall, slim, with the kind of charm that didn't need money to make an entrance. He'd come to Silver Pines on a fellowship, one of the few outsiders who managed to break into the town's artistic circles through merit rather than lineage. Elliot was a writer, or at least that's what he told people. In truth, he was a drifter with a gift for observation and a past he rarely unpacked. Their first meeting was accidental, or at least it seemed that way. A poetry reading, a spilled drink, a lingering glance. Savannah invited him to her estate under the guise of a retreat, a place where he could write, think, create. But it was never really about the writing. She offered him more than a roof, a lifestyle, a suite in the guest wing, a monthly allowance, tailored clothes, invitations to galas, access to the Morgan name. In return, she asked for one thing, his presence. And so he gave it. At first, it was easy. Elliot played the part of a tender companion, and Savannah basked in the illusion of something romantic, even sacred. Theirs wasn't a love story. It was a transaction cloaked in intimacy. But in Savannah's mind, it was devotion, until Harper Wu changed everything. Harper Wu was not from Silver Pines. She was the daughter of 2 immigrants from Taipei, a first-generation American who had clawed her way into the film department at a liberal arts college down the mountain. She didn't wear designer brands, didn't speak in half-truths, and didn't orbit the social elite. But what Harper did have was presence. She lit up a room without trying. She asked questions no one else dared ask. And when she laughed, it wasn't rehearsed. Elliot met her at an art festival in the nearby town of Evergreen Bluff, neutral ground, outside Savannah's reach. Harper had been screening her short documentary on forgotten mountain communities, and Elliot, bored of red carpets and 4 smiles, attended on impulse. They talked for hours. There was no pretense between them. Harper saw Elliot for what he was, brilliant, damaged, searching. And Elliot saw Harper for what she wasn't, controlling. What started as coffee turned into hikes, stolen weekends, and whispered calls made from the far end of the estate grounds, where Savannah's security system didn't reach. Harper wasn't naive. She asked questions. Elliot told her only part of the truth. He was staying with someone, he said, helping her through things. But secrets have weight, and the longer Elliot kept them, the harder it was to carry both Harper and Savannah in his arms. He didn't know Savannah already knew. Savannah had always believed in preparation. By the time she suspected Elliot's attention had shifted, she'd already begun taking precautions. It started with a GPS tracker in his car, then his phone, the password changed, but not before she cloned the backup. She paid a discreet investigator, hired a cybersecurity firm, installed software she had no business knowing about. She watched Elliot's movements, traced his purchases, even had her staff monitor who visited when she was away. And when she saw Harper's name, again and again, her fury crystallized into strategy. Savannah wasn't going to lose. She confronted Elliot not with tears, but with cold precision. A folder waited on his desk one night. Photographs, called logs, an anonymized transcript of texts. At the bottom was a copy of a police report. A name, Bryce Kendall. A year. A charge, aggravated assault. Dropped before trial. No conviction, but enough to raise questions. Elliot's face drained of color. "How did you get this?" he whispered. Savannah didn't answer. She didn't need to. She knew Elliot's past, the fight at a college bar gone too far, the man who'd nearly died. There had been a settlement, a sealed file, but nothing ever really stayed buried. One email. Savannah said, her voice like ice, "And you lose everything." He didn't respond. "Stay," she said. "Stay loyal, and I'll protect you." And just like that, Elliot became a prisoner in paradise. The estate felt colder after that. Elliot stopped going into town. He stopped returning Harper's calls. When she showed up at the university, he avoided her. When she wrote, he didn't reply. Savannah, in public, behaved as if nothing had changed. She posted photos of Elliot at charity events, at the wine cellar, at poolside brunches with labels tagged and captions curated. But behind the scenes, their relationship was a performance stitched together with fear. Elliot wasn't allowed to leave without notice. His room was monitored. His laptop had restrictions. Savannah told him she'd rescinded her threat, but he knew better. He was watched. Harper, meanwhile, grew worried. Her texts grew longer, more frantic. She didn't know about the blackmail, but she knew something was wrong. When she showed up at the estate gates, Savannah had her turned away. Still, Elliot didn't tell the truth. How could he? The guilt of dragging Harper into Savannah's world, of risking her safety, was more than he could bear. So he cut her out, thinking it was the only way to protect her. He didn't know it would break her. He didn't know it would break him, too. The night of the winter gala arrived with the first snow of the season. Savannah Morgan hosted it every year. It was her stage, her ritual, an evening of candlelight, crystal, and curated opulence. The ballroom of the Morgan estate was transformed into a frost-kissed dream. Guests arrived in chauffeured cars, descending in silken sequins. Champagne flowed like water. A string quartet played Vivaldi beneath a ceiling of floating glass orbs. And Elliot was there, of course, at Savannah's side, dressed in a midnight tuxedo he hadn't chosen, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. To the outside world, they looked perfect, but Elliot felt like a corpse in a masquerade. And then he saw her, Harper Wu, standing beneath the golden arch of the gallery corridor, wearing a velvet dress the color of embers. He didn't know how she'd gotten in, an invitation perhaps, or a guest's plus one. For a moment, time splintered. The music faded, and all he could feel was the ache. She looked at him, not with anger, not even confusion, just sadness. They didn't speak that night. They didn't have to. The moment carved something open in Elliot that could not be resealed. Something was going to break. The storm rolled in after midnight. Thunder cracked over the ridgelines as guests departed under umbrellas, and staff packed up glassware and linen. Savannah retired early, vanishing up the staircase in silence. Elliot followed, footsteps slow, heart pounding. In the master suite, the argument began without warning. "You saw her," Savannah said. He didn't deny it. "You think I'm stupid?" she snapped. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" "It's over," Elliot said quietly. "This, whatever this is, it's over." Savannah laughed. A cold, broken sound. "You don't get to end it," she said. "You think you can just walk away from everything I've given you after I saved you?" "You didn't save me," he said. "You trapped me." Lightning flashed outside the bay windows. For a moment, the room was bathed in white. Savannah reached for something on the desk, a heavy glass paperweight shaped like an eagle. Her hand trembled. "Don't," Elliot warned, but she threw it. The paperweight missed him by inches, striking the wall and bouncing onto the marble floor. Glass shattered. "Get out," she screamed. "You're nothing without me." Elliot stepped forward, voice low. "You don't owe me." Savannah lunged. He caught her by the shoulders, pushed her away instinctively. She stumbled, lost her balance. The back of her head struck the edge of the marble hearth with a sickening crack. And then silence. The fire in the hearth flickered, casting long shadows across Savannah's motionless body. Elliot stood frozen. Time fractured into pieces. Blood pooled slowly beneath her hair. Her eyes stared past him. He dropped to his knees. "Savannah?" No response. He reached for his phone, hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to run. But even in shock, he knew it was useless. The cameras, the staff, the paper trail. He backed away, trembling, and fled the room. The next morning, the housekeeper found her, curled by the hearth, hair soaked in blood, skin already cooling. She screamed, and within minutes, police swarmed the estate. Elliot was gone. He didn't make it far. 3 days later, he turned himself in, exhausted, disheveled, and haunted. He told the police what had happened, every word. But the truth, like Savannah's estate, was more complicated than anyone imagined. The courtroom was smaller than Elliot expected, colder, stripped of the grandeur and distraction that had defined his life with Savannah. There were no chandeliers, no polished marble, just stained carpet and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look tired. The charge was second-degree murder. The prosecution painted a story of a kept man who turned violent. They leaned into the age gap, the wealth dynamic, the imbalance of power. They showed photos of Savannah's body, the wound on her skull, and a blood-spattered edge of the marble fireplace. They described Elliot's disappearance as guilt, his return as strategy. But Harper Wu changed everything. She had been called as a reluctant witness, pale, subdued, her voice low. The prosecution wanted to use her to establish motive, a love triangle, jealousy, betrayal. Instead, Harper told the truth. She described Savannah's control, the threats, the surveillance, the blackmail. She told the court about the bar fight, the incident Savannah had weaponized, and how Elliot had lived in fear that his entire future could be dismantled with one whisper. Harper had seen it in his eyes, the guilt, the shame, the resignation. He wasn't free, she said. He was trapped. Her testimony cracked something open. Then came the digital evidence. Savannah's emails, unearthed through subpoena, revealed her increasing paranoia. Messages to staff with instructions to track Elliot's whereabouts. Transcripts of messages intercepted by spyware. Legal memos exploring the possibility of filing charges for breach of contract against a man she never officially employed. The narrative shifted. What had once looked like a crime of passion now looked like the final chapter of a psychological war. While the trial dragged on, Elliot sat in a cell at the county detention center. Days blurred into one another. He barely ate, barely spoke. His defense attorney, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a worn briefcase, urged him to testify, but Elliot refused. "No one wants to hear my story," he said. "They want a villain or a victim. I'm neither." He wrote letters instead, long, unraveling letters to Harper he never sent. He filled pages with guilt, sorrow, memories of the early days, before the estate, before the blackmail, before the gilded trap snapped shut. Some nights, he woke in a cold sweat, hearing Savannah's voice in silence. Other times, he missed her, not the manipulator, but the woman he'd first met, the one who'd handed him a flute of champagne and said, "You're too smart to be this broke." He had loved her once. Or at least, he'd wanted to. But love, twisted by control, was not love at all. After 2 weeks, the jury returned. The courtroom was packed with reporters, locals, and a few members of Savannah's family. Harper sat near the back, fingers curled around the strap of her bag, eyes fixed on the floor. The judge asked the foreman to stand. "On the charge of second-degree murder, how do you find defendant?" The pause was unbearable. "Not guilty." A murmur rippled through the room. The judge raised a hand for silence, and the foreman continued. "On the charge of involuntary manslaughter, guilty." Elliot closed his eyes. It was the outcome the defense had quietly hoped for. The prosecution had failed to prove intent, but the death itself was undeniable. Elliot had shoved her. She had died. The verdict was a compromise between punishment and mercy. The sentence, 5 years with parole eligibility after 3. The gavel fell. And just like that, the story ended, not with rage, but with a hush. Prison was a paradox. After everything, the surveillance, the control, the silence, Elliot found something close to peace behind bars. He had no illusions about what he'd done. Savannah was dead, and her blood was on his hands, even if it hadn't been premeditated. But for the first time in years, no one was pulling his strings. No cameras tracked his movement. No handlers monitored his words. In the quiet of his cell, he began to write, not just letters to Harper this time, but pages of fragmented thoughts, memories, observations. He wrote about the night they met, about the paperweight, about the day he realized he was no longer free. Some of it was raw. Some of it was incoherent. But all of it was real. Other inmates left him alone. A few recognized him from tabloids or court coverage. One called him the Heiress killer under his breath. But Elliot didn't fight it. He served his sentence quietly, working in the prison library and losing himself in philosophy texts and poetry. He didn't expect visitors. So when Harper showed up at the visitation room a year into his sentence, he thought he was hallucinating. She sat across the scratched plexiglass divider, hands in her lap. "I don't know why I came," she said. Elliot nodded. "Neither do I." They sat in silence. Then, finally, Harper whispered, "You didn't deserve what she did to you, but I wish you'd told me." "I didn't want you to get pulled into it," he said. "You already pulled me in," she replied. "But I stayed because I saw the person you were trying to be." She didn't promise to write. She didn't say she forgave him, but she didn't walk away in anger either. And in the absence of blame, Elliot found a seed of redemption. The Morgan estate was sold 6 months after the trial. Savannah's remaining family, distant cousins and a few vulture-like trust managers, argued bitterly over what was left of her legacy. Lawsuits were filed, bank accounts frozen. In the end, the property was sold to a private buyer, and the fortune was split in quiet, bitter fragments. But no amount of wealth could clean what had happened there. The media moved on. New scandals emerged, and the Silver Pines Heiress tragedy was pushed down the feed, then buried entirely. But for those closest to it, the scars remained. Harper graduated a year after the trial. She never made a film about Savannah or Elliot. When a studio offered to option her story, she declined. She refused to commodify pain. Instead, she moved to a quiet coastal town and took a job teaching film to high schoolers. Sometimes she still thought about Elliot, not with longing or even sadness, but with a strange kind of reverence, like someone remembering a myth too real to dismiss and too painful to revisit often. She never returned to Silver Pines. Neither did Elliot. 3 years passed. On a gray spring morning, the prison gate slid open, and Elliot Lane stepped back into the world. His hair was longer, his shoulders thinner, but his eyes were clear in a way they hadn't been in years. No reporters waited, no familiar faces, just freedom. He didn't go back to his old life. There was nothing left to return to. Instead, he moved anonymously to a small town 2 states away and began working at a bookstore under an assumed name. He never spoke of Savannah Morgan. He didn't have to. Sometimes he'd pass a cafe and hear a woman laugh, and his body would tense before relaxing again. Sometimes he woke from dreams of marble floors and firelight, but those dreams no longer owned him. One day, a letter arrived and signed "No return address." Inside was a single sentence, typed in clean black ink. "Love isn't supposed to hurt." He read it twice, then folded it gently and tucked into the back of a book of poems he kept by his bed. He never contacted Harper again. But in the quiet, in the absence of chains and screams, he learned to breathe again. He had been loved. He had been broken. And now, finally, he was free. In Silver Pines, the estate still stands. Empty, its windows shuttered, the marble hearth cold. Locals say it's haunted, but the real ghosts aren't in the house. They're in the choices we make when power tastes like love, when obsession disguises itself as devotion, and when we forget that control and care are not the same. Savannah Morgan's story ended in blood. Elliot Lane's began there, and somewhere far from the weight of history, a life rebuilt itself, quietly, patiently, in the spaces where no one was watching.